started?
Yes, please. Do you need me?
I think, did you want to start? Or?
I can start.
Okay.
Sure. If I could, councilors, if I could just update you as to status as of today.
Oh, yeah.
Following up from our budget hearing, we have a few resumes that have been provided. The plan is for the Deputy Mayor Owens, Corporation Council, and myself to convene. We will review those application resumes, make a recommendation to the mayor, and then that will be forwarded to the Common Council for approval. That's the plan on the applications. In terms of the details that come up at our hearing related to process and procedures, there are some procedures that are outlined in the ordinance, and a few will be compiled when the director, when he or she is retained for the position. So I will take any questions. I know Ken and Stephanie are here also. If you have any more specifics.
Are you guys looking internally for someone, or is it just an open process?
It was a public advertisement, so it's not strictly just city employees. It was open up to the public.
And who's going to be responsible for training this individual?
Well, let me just also add another point.
Okay.
The Bureau, why it's in the Finance Department. Again, it's in finance as an independent bureau, independent agency to adjudicate what code enforcement, the citations that code enforcement will issue. So that's why we're kept separate. Okay. So in terms of the training of the director, going to your question, I think myself as well as the Corporation Council would need to be part of that. This position is a full-time position. He or she will be expected to comply with the city's payroll, timesheet, attendance, all that. And that myself I will be involved in that. In terms of the, I'm not an attorney. I will defer to the Corporation Council in her office for that. In terms of the specifics, as you read the ordinance, it does require certain knowledge. It requires knowledge of the of law. And along with our due diligence, when we review the resumes, again, we need to verify the 5-year requirement, just as the ordinance indicates. So there's some background work we need to complete.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Councilor Thompson, did you have questions on the fees? Was that one of your questions?
Yes. Is this the correct time to bring those up?
We can.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So how did we, I guess the question is, how did we derive at this this number?
Okay.
I'll let you go from there, so I don't answer your question.
All the numbers, right?
Numbers.
You're referring
Yeah,
to
yeah.
150, 300.
How did we come to
75, 150.
So last year, prior to the council approving the Municipal Violations Bureau, we met 3 or 4 times with a bunch of stakeholders in the community, city employees, community groups, landlords, and fines were discussed throughout this process, and these were the numbers that we came up with.
Okay, did we look to other cities or anything perchance?
Rochester's, we compared it with them, so we're very comparable with them.
And what do we charge now? Or what is the fee now?
It's $100 per day per violation when it's adjudicated through the city court or the state Supreme Court.
Okay.
And I believe zoning violations are $500 a day per violation. That's why the disparity between zoning fees and, or zoning fines and property maintenance fines.
So does this eliminate the daily penalty?
No, this is in conjunction with that, because we still want to utilize our Corporation Council to go to court for major health and safety violations.
In section C, the part related to the the inspections. I think the rental registry. Anyways, could the penalty for the first ticket at least be equal to the rental registry amount? Because the penalty is only 50, but the rental registry is 150.
Well, our belief is that if they're not applying, part of it would be, we would want them to apply to comply, and that's gonna be a $150 fee. They could add both, but once again, this will be something that the director, when he's hired, is gonna determine upon adjudication.
I'm sure the time frames are in here, but what's the time period between the first ticket of the penalty of $150 then to the second of $300?
In theory, you can, once it's adjudicated, for the first ticket's adjudicated, the next day you can issue the second ticket.
Oh, okay.
Even if they didn't have an opportunity to go before the board?
That's after it's, so if they've gone in front, if they have not gone in front of the board on their own accord, it's a penalty upon default. Therefore, it's been adjudicated, and then right on that first day after that adjudication, we're allowed to ticket the second time.
And is there a cap? Like, when would this, cap off or end the penalty as far as it increasing?
I don't think we've discussed a cap, but I think if we get to a point where there's still no compliance or no communication with landlords, then we're gonna push it to our corp counsel to go to have a judge have an order to compel.
Okay.
The section that talks about administrative law judges, it says the director shall appoint up to 7. Did anything go into the 7 number, and how much does a administrative law judge typically cost?
It's up to 7,
Correct.
it's up to 7. The panel, the appeal panel per the ordinance is 3, minimum of 3. So for an appeals, there'll need to be 3 administrative judges, and neither can be involved in the case. So if the administrative law judge hears the case, renders a decision, he or she cannot be involved in the appeals. So I think we're looking at least 3 separate individuals.
And our ordinance is based off of New York State general education law, so that's where it states in that
Right.
Education law that you have to have at least up to 7 administrative law judges.
Does anybody here know what the typical salary range for an administrative law judge is? Oh, it's just hourly.
Was that?
It's $125 an hour. I think
Well,
is
for,
what we
I believe that's what's budgeted for the part-time, but there'll be 1 full-time administrative law judge,
correct. And that'll be the director.
the director. Right.
So is this consistent with the parking violations? Hearing it, yeah,
That's what we estimated the budget on.
based on that, yeah.
Well, the rate of pay for the parking is not the same as the rate of pay here. Should point that out, because that come up at our budget hearing. The parking hearing is a different title. The hearing examiner for parking violations, they're paid $75 an hour.
Okay.
Administrative law judge here was $125 an hour. They're all part-time. The law judge here, the 1 person will be full-time.
So we have Councillor Bay and then Councillor Driscoll.
Thank you. I don't have any questions about budget and cost. Just maybe some points of clarification or confirmation for me. So, actually this is very well done. It kind of eliminated a lot of questions, but just for confirmation. So I see that the board doesn't have, obviously, the power to detain anyone, right, or to issue orders of arrest. That's spelled out in here.
Right.
But it does operate as similar to an administrative court, correct? Correct. And just for further clarity, you don't have to run down the whole issue, but just the type of issues that fall under its jurisdiction. And I ask that because, I think there are some things that overlap, and I can give examples, but we'll probably be here for a while. But there are some things that may overlap between like zoning and, some other things, some other, even what might be considered or fall in some ways under criminal violations. There are some things that can overlap. I can give an example if I need to, but just for clarity, what types of things falls under the jurisdiction?
Well, there's four categories. I think Ken can probably get into more detail on it, but 4 categories, and there's...
So, Councilor, Property Maintenance Code of New York State and the Syracuse Property Conservation Code is going to cover what the MVB will adjudicate, including the zoning ordinance. So anything that was zoning may overlap, but if it's a zoning issue, that's going to be cited by our office and then adjudicated through the MVB, and then the property maintenance side. Exterior blight, failure to apply for any of the periodic inspections, certificate of use, certificate of compliance, rental registry, and then trash and debris, overgrowth, those are things that we will cite. And if we don't have communication or compliance, then we're going to push it towards the MVB.
Okay. All right, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Driscoll?
Yeah, so can you walk us through, like, so how many people are going to be involved initially?
Well, initially,
Clarify, there's going to be one person who's the main
director,
right?
and that title is administrative law judge. Once that individual is working for the city, at that time we will convene and then determine future strategy. Again, I think it's minimum 3 will be required to comply with the appeals in the event someone were to appeal one of these items. The way the ordinance is written, as well as state law, is the panel must be at least 3 judges. So I think at that point, and again with the ordinance, the administrative law judge, the director, he or she has the option to review candidates for these part-time positions. So I think at that point, that's why I think until we have that individual here working for the city, at that point we move forward to get the additional part-time.
So the administrative law judge would be a full-time position, I'm imagining?
One full-time position, correct.
They would handle the bulk of the adjudication themselves until it gets to an appeal.
Right.
Unless an appeal.
Now, if there's a volume of work, the way I read the ordinance is if there's a volume of work, a part-time law judge can hear the case. The only requirement is that he or she not be involved in the appeal. That's the only difference. So initially, the way I expect it to occur is the full-time person will hear the appeals, and then eventually we need to get the 3 part-time law judges. But if there's a volume of work that's there, any one of the 4 can. And we do have the requirement. We have the option to go up to 7 per the ordinance.
So who will be the direct supervisor of the director?
In terms of timekeeping, it will be me. The individual will report to me. And again, it's a full-time position. The ordinance requires that. So the director will be a full-time employee of the city and will file a timesheet, and will file a timesheet with me, and I will review it and approve it.
But I guess the question, if the director's doing a bad job, whose responsibility is it to?
Yeah, I believe again that's addressed in the ordinance. It cannot be, he or she can't be removed unless there's cause. Going to your question, it's a good question. At what point does it become an issue? I don't know if we've actually sat and discussed that. I think it would be similar to other make it comparable to what would be required of any other full-time employee, non-union type of individual.
Okay.
Follow those same guidelines.
Are there any ballpark quotas for, I mean, I know it's really difficult before everything is started, but based on Rochester or anything else, like any ballpark quotas of how many cases the administrative law judge would be handling, or what they accomplish in a day kind of thing? Is there any metrics we could measure them by to expect results?
I don't know, Stephen, do you have anything on that?
I know that's kind of in the weeds and asking of something that probably you don't have numbers readily, but.
So we made a good point. We don't know exactly what to expect. We looked at historical data in terms of how many violations did codes issue that were not complied with in a 30-day period, and on average, that's in the neighborhood of over 4,000 a year. Now, those that are not complied with within a 90-day period is another 4,000. So when we start looking at potential volume of first and second tickets, it's going to be in that neighborhood. Potentially. Now, will we have the volume to, we're going to start this off, thoughtfully and slow in terms of Ken's team and how they addressed, cases going forward and training staff and making sure we have the mechanics in place just so that when the ticket's issued, it goes over to finance, it goes over to the administrative law judge. And that's where that adjudication process starts. So we don't know what to expect. We intend to do a lot of outreach with landlords, let them know this is coming, what to expect, hold some open sessions to come learn more. We hope that they take ticketing seriously, much like with the tax foreclosure process. Until we sort of got started, folks didn't take it seriously, and now we have much higher compliance rates in that area as well.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
I apologize for coming in late, and stop me if these have already been answered. Do we realistically think that this is actually going to kick off and begin on the initial date that we had said, July 1st? Or do we think
Well, we do have resumes, and we're working on it very soon, next few days, next week. Our plan is to review that, so I think it's possible.
Okay. And then this is probably more of a question for you. From that start point, will then all those minor tickets be sent directly over to that person starting July 1st, or is that something where we're going to probably have some growing pains and have to wait a little bit?
Initially, we cannot. We've already cited for the properties that we've already cited. We're going to follow the course that we've been taking.
Yep.
So anything new starting July 1st, we'll give them their normal comply by dates. That's not changing. And then once it hits that comply by date, and we have no communication or no plan from the owner, then we have the right to ticket them after that 21 days.
Okay. And what do we think? And again, this is probably, to Joe's point, kind of in the weeds and not really sure. What do we realistically think we're going to see numbers-wise this year? What's actually going to be sent to this as opposed to, the law department? Like, I don't know if you have numbers, percentages, just ballpark. What are we thinking? Maybe 75% of the tickets are going to end up going there, 50%, 60.
My belief is that a high percent, 75 to 80, will go the MVB route after that comply by date, and then the major ones that we run into will still go to the law department.
Okay.
I think majority of what we're going to see in the get-go is going to be our periodic inspections, the owners who have not ever applied. So those, we have to come up with a structured plan on how we're going to handle this. I don't want to go out and hit all the properties at once and then overload our judge first month of the year. So we're going to come up with a plan, and I think the first step is going to go for those periodic inspections and then work our way towards those other violations on properties. With how we've changed things and reaching out to owners in the past 6 months, we've seemed to get a positive feedback from owners. So I'm thinking that with that continuing, we may not see as many tickets for property maintenance side as long as they're still communicating with us. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be still that 10 to 15% of landlords who, throw their nose up at us constantly. Those are the ones we're going to really go after.
Okay. And then just one last thing with their senior hearing examiners that we have for the Parking Violations Bureau. Are they individuals that would be capable of hearing the appeals? I mean, I know they've got a different set of requirements, but would they fit into this?
Well, because they're attorneys, they would fit. The question, one of the items with the appeals, we have the director, the administrative law judge, the chief judge, and then the 3 part-time. They can, any of those titles can hear a case, but they cannot handle the appeals. Mm-hmm. Now, whether an individual can occupy both, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
If they have the qualifications.
If they meet the 5-year, I believe that's a similar requirement for the parking judges, that they all have 5-year experience and be a licensed attorney for 5 years. I don't know that. Again, and then the issue is, are there any conflicts with adjudicating this and a parking ticket? Again, maybe that's a case by case. I just don't know at this point. It's something we need to talk further about.
Okay.
So one of the qualifications is you have to have a background in housing, don't you? Isn't that one of the qualifications for somebody who's supposed to be a...
For the judge?
Yeah.
I believe it was more on the legal side, experience with municipal law.
Municipal law and
Administrative law.
Administrative, okay. I knew there was some there. I have three quick, all along the same line. Where will it be housed physically?
To be determined.
Okay. Then it will be determined where the hearings will be housed.
To be determined, yes.
And last but not least, it says in here that either a steno for the hearings, you got to have a steno, or you got to have a recording device and whatnot, and be ready to be able to be transcribed and such. I would imagine they'll use a recording device. I imagine. I'm not positive, but do they have any plans for this? And
I mean, for example, in parking, that's what we have a recording device in the hearing room. That's what's used.
and they'll use
something
the
similar.
same
Yeah.
structure as what law does relative to those hearings and the tapes and everything you got to keep and everything else, right?
Well, the director will have some discretion setting up these procedures, so, but generally that would be the case.
And the procedures would be done after this person is hired and before July 1st or whenever, to whenever
That's-
it takes place before they can start them, that's
Right.
all.
I mean, that's the plan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And that person probably will be tasked with finding a place for themselves to,
Well, we're working on that. We have some ideas. Nothing's final at this point, but yeah, we have some locations that we are looking at.
okay.
Some at City Hall, some at the Commons, but yeah, we're working on that. And I think that is obviously an issue. The other item, just to follow up further, in terms of administrative, this individual will report to me administratively, but in terms of the details regarding the cases, I have nothing to do with that. That's all the administrative law judge unit that will be responsible for adjudicating all those violations.
Any further questions?
On the name, the ordinance says the Bureau of Administrative Adjudication. We continue to call it the Municipal Violations Bureau. Are we gonna just call it both forever, or are we gonna choose one? And do you have a recommendation for which one to choose?
I'd like to second the counselor's question.
Well, the ordinance says Bureau of Administrative Adjudication. I think that's what we call it. Unless somebody changes the order, revises the ordinance, that's what. I mean, it's like the Parking Violations Bureau. I mean, that's, it's also known as the Municipal Violations Bureau in a way also. I mean, I've heard that called, but it's really the Parking Violations Bureau. So this should be what's entitled in the ordinance, Bureau of Administrative Adjudication.
MVB has a much nicer ring to it,
Well, it does.
just for the record. But
We're gonna
I'll
call it
go with
BA.
BAA, if that's what we're saying.
Bah.
Ba. What's that? I jumped the shark there? All right.
Any
Try.
other questions? No?
On the section 27-189B, it talks about however, the monetary penalties shall not exceed the maximum amount allowed by Syracuse City Court. What's that? Is that like a large amount? Is that an amount that, does anybody know?
Item is that?
So it's in section 27-189, power and duties of the Bureau, and then section B. And it just says monetary penalties shall not exceed the maximum amount allowed by Syracuse City Court judge. I was just curious if anybody knows what.
Where the court has certain jurisdiction up to a certain amount. It's in the CPLR. It used to be 15, I'm not sure.
15.
15,000. So basically, when you go to court for housing, where it's like you have a penalty, it's $100 a day. So your judgment generally, for ours, our penalties are considered like. But if I was suing you for something, in city court's jurisdiction is generally 15,000.
Is it 15,000 a year or 15,000 total?
No, it's 15,000 per item. It's
Oh, per item?
It's a lawsuit thing. It's more for that. But they keep it general because they do change them periodically, so that may have gone up since.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. All right, thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yours.
There will be a finance meeting in about 15 minutes to talk about the financial restructuring board.